Hello and welcome to Jerry's Live. My name is Michaela and I'm going to be your host today. Today's class code is going to be 351, and that class code is going to be useful in case you want to know anything that I'm using today. You'll pop that into JerrysArtarama.com and it will show you everything. Now, today is going to be super fun. Today we're talking about traditional Chinese ink painting. Now, I really enjoyed prepping for today because I was able to learn a little bit about something that I didn't previously know a lot about. Now, the fun thing about what I'm going to cover today in particular is there's some special things that I wouldn't usually see in other art. Now, the things are rice paper. Now, rice paper is going to be a very thin and dainty but beautiful surface to work on. I have some calligraphy brushes that come with this Zhen set, and these are going to be very similar to watercolor brushes, but they have a very unique character to them. Each one of these 4 brushes is going to be very unique and fun and have its own use. We also have a set for creating your own stamp. So if you know what traditional Chinese art or even Japanese art, they have a nice red seal to show their signature, and it really is incorporated into the artwork. So out of all those things, plus our ink, we're going to jump in and create something kind of fun. So I have a couple examples in front of me while I was testing things out. And I wanted to show these because there are 2 different types of rice paper from this Zhen collection, and one of them is super fun. So if we go ahead and do the overhead camera, I have a super cute Toulouse goose on one, and this is my kitten Gigi when she was a wee babe. And it shows how this is the traditional rice paper. You can see how transparent this is and how nice and delicate this is. You can also see the lines from when it was created from the press, and I really enjoy these lines because it comes in a really large roll of multiple sheets of paper. So I am always cutting these down to the size that I want. And those lines in the paper really help. I don't really need a ruler. I can just follow those lines to cut a nice straight line. Now, this is the one that I'm really excited about. This is sparkle paper. Now, what makes it sparkly is it has tiny little areas of mica embedded into the paper. I don't know if you can already see some of the sparkle that's going on. I want to go to the dynamic camera just to make sure you guys can see just how sparkly this paper is. There we go. It's so nice. And it's really fun because even when you put this really dark ink on here, I'm still seeing some sparkle coming through the ink. So even if you cover it up, you're still getting that sparkle, which is super nice. Now, I'm going to jump in and start a new painting. And I did a lot of animals. So I have my Toulouse goose, I have a kitten, and I'm going to paint a baby cow. And the reason is because these brushes, the character I was talking about, are absolutely perfect for creating animal hair. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what each of these can do before I jump into my painting. So let's move some things around. And I have a couple sheets that I cut up, and this is the traditional rice paper. I will be doing my cow on sparkle paper because it is my favorite, and I feel sparkly goes well with baby cow. Now, I also have this watercolor board, and that is because this rice paper is so delicate. And once it gets wet, it's going to become a lot more delicate. So having something to put it on, let it dry before you're picking it up and you can move it around while it's still wet, is going to help, because you definitely want to leave it be until you are done and it is dry before you start moving it again. So here are my 4 brushes. I'm going to pour some ink, and I'm actually going to use these porcelain trays as paperweights. And I'm going to pour in this sumi ink. And a little bit goes a long way. This bottle will last you a really long time. You really don't need a lot to create a full piece. So I'm just going to put a little bit there, and I'm going to use my little pipette and just have the water here so you can see what I'm doing with the water. Now, a really big thing, since this can get very delicate when wet, is you have to be careful with the amount of water you are using. So I have just a little bit of water here so I can water down my ink, but I really don't want a lot, and I'll show you what I mean. So before I do that, these are my 4 brushes. All of these are going to be made with either horsehair or goat hair, or a combination of that and nylon. This one is going to be some horsehair. It is going to be your detail brush, and it does spring back. This is the next size up. This is going to be goat hair and nylon. And this one I feel is the softest. So I can kind of pull it to the side, and it's starting to keep its shape as I pull it to the side. Has a little bit of spring back in the middle. This one is going to be a little bit different from this one. It's not going to have as much spring back. When I pull it to the side, those bristles are going to stay that way. And this one is also goat hair and nylon. And then this one is going to be another horsehair. This is going to do the most, where if I pull it to the side, it's going to stay that way. A little bit of spring back. You'll especially see that when I get it wet. But let's go ahead and start with this guy. Now, let me get it really wet and show you what happens. So I grab a lot of water and some ink, and I'm going to drag this down here. It's going to start spreading, and the more it sits there, the more it's going to spread. I can go back in with just water. If I want to do a thin line, it's just going to keep spreading. Do we have a question?
We have a couple of questions about the paper as we're getting started. One, can you use any paint medium on it?
I wouldn't use oil because it will bleed out as soon as you put oil on this. And I mean, you could use acrylic, but I personally would not use acrylic. I think ink, watercolor, markers, colored pencils, those would be something great on here.
And then this is different from the edible rice paper that you use in
confectionery. Yes, this is very much different. This is going to be something that you can use in art, not in the kitchen.
And then my last one is, if you don't have rice paper, what's the next best thing?
Watercolor paper. Yes.
We have a question over on YouTube to ask, would you ever want to tape the paper down?
You could. I would be very careful with it because you would want to use a very non-tacky tape for this. It's going to stick to the paper really well. It's going to tear a little bit when you take the tape off. And traditionally they use 2 paper weights on both sides to keep it flat. And then once they finish, you can mount it to a sturdier piece of paper, and that's usually how they finish it up. All right. Now, you can do washes like this, just be very careful. Traditionally, you're gonna want very little water, and even once I've loaded it up, I'm just going to make sure there's not any extra droplets coming off. So I'm gonna scrape off a little bit. So you want it to be wet, but not too dry, so that you can be a lot more precise with your line work. Even your lines can come out like this. Now, this right here, the breaking in the line, is a very fun and sought after mark. And while you're working, something with this medium, artists will aim for, I don't want to say perfection, but once they put a stroke down, it is no longer erasable. It is down there and you can't really work at it. So now that I put this wash on here, if I start painting on top of it, it's going to start disrupting the paper. And that is okay. A lot of artists paint with this water medium on this rice paper. They just learn how to become very good at controlling their water. So I'm going to do a couple more strokes and I'll show you a different brush. Now this large brush, the one that I said kind of holds its shape, especially when wet. I'll get it wet over here. Something that a lot of artists will do is they will twist their brush so it creates a fan, and then get it wet with their ink and create really nice hair texture. This is my absolute favorite, and that's why I've done so many animals with this medium. You can also create really nice tree trunks and branches with this separated brush. It's so nice. Now, these other brushes are pretty similar in terms of what they do. This one, since it is the softest, I would use this for things like these washes. And then I love this tiny detailed brush for starting off my paintings. And I'll show you what I need. Let's go ahead and transition into our cow. Now I'll show you another example of controlling water. As I was testing out my techniques before tonight, I was doing different types of water control, painting the same thing. So in the middle here, I had just too much water and it completely eradicated my shape. This one was a little bit less water. It kept its shape, but it became very fuzzy. This one had almost no water. It was kind of a thick, pasty watercolor, and it retained its shape. So you really have to be careful with how much water you're putting on there. We have a question?
Yeah, speaking of that, we have a friend on Instagram that's wondering, would you ever like pre-wet the rice paper like you might a watercolor paper?
I've tried that. I wouldn't recommend it. You definitely can, but again, if you're going to do it, do not touch the paper until it is dry, and be very careful with how you're adding on there. You don't want to disrupt the surface of the paper, but you definitely can. I have done it. You just have to be careful with moving it around until it's dry. Another question?
Is the ink the same ink that you would do like traditional calligraphy with?
Yes. And actually, thank you for bringing that up, while we're on that, I did have on another complete set of the same materials. This is the Golden Panda Double Heart set. And inside it has almost everything that I've pointed out so far, and then a couple extra things. So in the lid here has all of those brushes, a bunch of different kinds. It also has 2 soapstones, which I'll kind of go into a little bit later. It has a paperweight for holding down your paper. It has the ink for stamping your initial stamp. And then the ink is a little bit different. So the black ink you actually create yourself, and it's very much a part of the process in getting into the artistic rhythm before you start. So this little guy here you would fill with a little bit of water and add just a little bit of water to your grinding plate here. Very little bit of water. And then you will go in, this is your ink stick. This is pure concentrated ink, and you will start grinding in a circle into that tiny puddle of water for 5-10 minutes, maybe 2 hours. You're just really going for the consistency you want. You want it to be really dark. The longer you grind it, the darker you're going to get. You can always add more water and keep going. There is a little indentation around the side here, if you can see that. So once you start making ink, you can brush it off to the side so you can fill this ink well and keep grinding out more ink if you need to. Oh, and then this guy here is going to be a little brush rest to hold your brushes off the table. You have another question?
Yeah, what's the difference between this ink and like a black watercolor paint?
It's going to be what it is, like how it's made. I'll have to double check what exactly the biggest difference is, but I know it's just how it's made. Now let's go ahead and start our little cow. So here's my reference photo. I thought he was absolutely adorable. Put him up here so you guys can see. And I'll move these down to hold my paper. I'll actually get some fresh water. Now, in order to start something like this, I'm not going to jump straight in with the black ink. I'm actually going to start with watercolor. I want to create the nose, which is not black or white, and then I'll create the eyes with my detail brush, and then I'll go from there. But I have some Soho watercolor. I'm going to go ahead and start with that nose and making sure I'm controlling my water. So I really like this soft brush because I'm going to be kind of washy. I want it to be a little transparent. I'm going to go ahead, grab some water. Again, I don't want too much. I have this rag here, which is going to be very helpful. I'm going to start mixing a pink. And I don't want it to be too watery, but I do want it to be watery to grab some of my colors. So I'll get it wet, grab my color, mix it, keep going. You have another question?
Yeah, on Instagram we're wondering if the ground ink that you're using feels any different from a black watercolor or like a liquid ink that you might buy in a bottle, pre-bottled.
It's very similar. I feel like there's a slight difference with how it goes on, but I don't really know how to explain it. That's definitely something that you would have to try yourself and feel that difference. Alright. I think I wanted a little bit more brown. Okay, so I'm going to add all of this paint to my bristles, tap out any extra water on my rag here. I'm going to start creating my nose shape. And I really like this soft one because I can really press the bristles down and move that watercolor around. Again, once I add more ink or watercolor, I'm making sure I dab off any extra water so I can retain any shape I create. Now I have seen some absolutely stunning pieces where they do add quite a bit of water. Like you can create a cat with one brush mark and it really just seeps out and creates a really fuzzy texture. So you can definitely do that. Just being aware of what makes what and how to control things, you can utilize them on purpose. All right. So there's my little cow nose. I'll probably add some shading and value with the sumi ink. Maybe I'll add just a little bit of something in the middle to darken it up. There we go. Now, again, this is something that doesn't erase, and it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? They like that. They like being able to, once you make something that isn't quite right, they will put it aside and try another one until they get the right thing. And this type of medium is so great for learning how to control water, how to draw, how to make the perfect brush stroke. Using these materials is really going to help you in a whole other area of mediums as well. Okay, so I always like to have the colorful part, the nose, and the eyes done. So when I did my cat, I started with the eyes and the nose, and then I went out from there. So I'm going to go in and do the eyes. Now the eyes are black, but I really want to make sure that those are just right. And being very careful with how I put it on here. I have a nice reflection in the eye. I want to maintain that. And there's a nice highlight underneath the eye. And I'll do the same thing on the other side.
You're so brave to do it that way. I would just smear that eye all over the place.
Alright. This one has a highlight right down the middle. So I'm going to do the top half. And then I'll do the bottom. This cow has such sad little eyes.
Because he's hungry.
Is that what it is? It's hangry eyes. Alright, and then he also has that highlight under this eye. We need to name this cow. So while I'm working, I need some cow names. Okay, so I'm going to call those eyes good, and now I'm going to go in and create the brushy hair-like texture to fill out the rest of the face. And like I said, this big guy is absolutely perfect for that. Once it is wet, you can twist it and it will remain in that shape, and it's so perfect for those hair strokes. And it's already kind of damp, so I don't need to wet it. I'll just go ahead and grab my ink. And I'm going to add the furry texture along the edges, and then I'll fill in the really dark parts. So here's part of my ear. And I always like to be mindful of the direction I'm painting with this medium as well. So I'm following the direction of the hair and how it is flowing. And I'm breaking up my fuzzy strokes with some smooth strokes. I have a smooth one up here, and a smooth one down here. And the side of his face is pretty smooth. I just love how fuzzy his ears are. Okay, let's do the other ear. And then I want a little bit more of a fanned out point so I can get these little fuzzy details. He's got a little spot on top of his head. And then this part of the ear is smooth, so I'm going to try and keep that kind of smooth. My brush is drying out a little bit, grab a little bit more. And I'm not a fan of the tag on his ear, so I might just not do that part. And then this is kind of smooth up here. And then gets a little fuzzy. All right. So now I have the fur outlined. Oh, I didn't do the side, hold on. But once I have the fur outlined, I can go ahead and now fill in that whole area with black ink. Alright, let's go ahead and clean that off. And I'm going to use one of the medium brushes. I think I like this guy. Make sure he's... Oh, I guess I don't need to be clean. I'm gonna grab just a little bit more ink since it's starting to dry a little bit. I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint everything that is pure black. Now in this cow's face there are some gray areas and you can absolutely get some gray tones with this ink. So I'm going to go in and just do those super dark areas. And again, being aware of my direction. This is really dark. Painting around my eyes. got a little bit more up here. I can now get a little bit more detail now that I have a nice fine point on my bristles. And it looks like almost the entirety of this ear is pretty dark. Alright, let's go ahead and do the other ear. That ear also looks pretty dark. Starts up here. There's a nice gray area in the temple. Painting around those eyes. Now, I have seen that there is a way that you can hold it that is traditional. You can absolutely use this however feels the most comfortable. But I thought I would share it just because it was kind of interesting. So they hold it with 2 fingers on top and the thumb on the bottom, and then these 2 fingers underneath, like this. That's a little weird for me, just because I'm not used to it, but I always think it's cool to see how different artists work and see if that's something that works for you. Can never go wrong with a little bit more information. Do we have any more questions while I'm going?
No, but we have some votes about cow names.
Let me hear them.
Well, a lot of them are girl names, and then you said he. So
it can be a girl. She can be a sweet girl.
We have some Daisies.
Oh.
Some Bessies. A Miss Bliss, which
Miss Bliss.
Megan.
Cute.
Pearl.
Pearl.
Maud.
Or like Maud.
Oh, I love Maud.
YouTube's got Maud is great. YouTube has Rosebud,
Oh.
Elsie, also a Bessie. And then we were discussing Tater.
Tater.
But because it's a baby, it's a tater tot.
Oh, little tater tot. How about Maud the tater tot?
Combined.
All right. Now you can lay down your darks and let it dry and then do another coat in case you want it super, super dark. I'm going to redefine this little cheek or nose lump. Does anyone know how big baby cows are? Because I know, like, adult cows are huge.
Have you ever seen a Great Dane?
Are they really that big?
Yeah, they're about that big. There are cows at the top of my parents' neighborhood, and they're about that big.
That is so
I mean,
crazy.
look at their moms. They're...
I love that. Okay, So now that I have that on there, I'm going to do two different tones. I want to make a dark gray and a light gray. I want the dark gray to fill in those different shapes in the dark area, and I want a light gray to create this really nice little furry patch on the forehead. So let's just go ahead and mix it in with the water I have over here. Let's test it out, see how dark this is. I feel like that could work. Let's take my water off. That's a good dark gray. I'm just going to fill in anything that I didn't in the black area of her face. And then maybe I'll even go into the nose with this color. Bring out her little nostrils. Maybe get a little darker at the top. And since it is pretty wet, all I have to do is tap that in to let it kind of fade into the rest of the color. And then I'll add his little mouth, her little mouth. Controlling that water. Alright. So let's go ahead and make a lighter version. Just going to wipe this out, add some new water. And we'll just add in just a little bit. I don't want to get too dark. I just want a nice light wash. Tap out any extra water. Test it out. And the nice thing about being able to cut down your own size from a large sheet or a large roll is you have a couple scrap sizes. You can use these for tests. You can see how light it is. It keeps flying away from me. You can use it to dry off your brushes. You can use it to test. These will not go to waste, I promise you. Now let's go ahead and add in the little fur on her forehead, which let's switch to my other brush that fans out a little bit better. So let's go ahead and twist my brush, add that in, tap out any extra water. She has a cute little twisty mark where all the hair kind of flows out from the center. It's a little bit darker on this side. I'm going to have a little bit of a transition between her light and dark. Trying to be careful with the direction. Underneath here is a little bit darker. So now I'm at a point where I have a cute little cow, And to finish it off, like I said, you can mount it to another sturdier piece of paper. You can frame it as is. Traditionally, you're going to finish it off with a signature. So just like I had on my cat and my goose, I had my stamp. So that's what this guy is for. So just like I had showed you in the double heart set, let's see if I can get her open. There we go. I said that it had 2 blocks of soapstone. Now this soapstone is going to be what you create your stamp with. I'm actually going to hold on to one of these so I can show you an example. But the Zhen collection has their own little stamp set, and I love this one because it has a dragon already carved on the top of your little chop block here. Now I wanted to go over this because you do have to carve your own signature or whatever you want on here, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to show you, I have a blank one here, but soapstone is going to be pretty soft, but it's still hard enough that you're going to want to use a carving tool. So I have this set of wood and lino cutting tools. These work perfectly. I actually use one of these 2 guys, really tiny, if I can get it. There we go. So I use one of these 2. So one is a very nice detailed V. You can carve those thick, deep lines. And then I also have one that's just a nice point that can help get those really thin, detailed lines and curves. Now, before you jump in, you want to create a design or a signature. Mine was pretty easy, thankfully, because it's an M and a W and they go together and it's all straight lines. So it didn't take me too long. And you also don't have to carve very deep. I don't know if you guys can see, I didn't carve very deep into the soapstone. Since it is a nice, durable, flat surface, you can just barely scratch it and create a nice indentation. Now for this, you can see that my W comes before the M. And that is because if you are doing anything with printmaking of any kind or stamps like this, you have to reverse your image, because once you put it down, it's going to create a different image. So before you do that, I always recommend doing a sketch or a drawing the same size, plan it out, and then reverse it, create the opposite design. Then you can draw it on here. You can use Sharpie or pencil or whatever you need. You can even transfer your drawing onto the soapstone. Then you're going to take your carving tools, carve around, or you can carve into your design. So let me show you real quick. I have just an accurate drawing pencil. Maybe. Okay. So let's say I do the same thing. I know my W is going first, so I'll just draw it on here. You can see even with the pressure of my pencil, it's starting to indent into the soapstone. So it's soft enough that you can definitely get by without using too much pressure, but hard enough that you're going to want to use these nice carving tools. So in order to carve this, you are going to have to hold it. So because you are using sharp tools, make sure you are holding it so that there's still a little bit of space above your fingers here. You also want to make sure that your thumb is holding it steady. So that way you can go in and start to carve. Now this one is really nice because you can see the pink where I started to carve. I'm going to dust away the dust. You can see it's a little bit more fine. This will take a little bit of time, and there are other artists out there that specialize in doing this. So if you are scared to make it yourself, there are artists out there that specialize in this, but I definitely recommend trying this out for yourself. It is so much fun. So let me try and carve one line, and I'll show you just how long it takes to carve a line that's deep enough or wide enough. And then I'll show you the difference between this one and the one I already made, because there are two different ways that you can do this. So you can see on these, one is I'm carving the line, the other is I'm carving around my line. So this one is going to be all red with a white line. This one is going to be white around my red line. And I kind of framed it so I had a little bit more red in there. And I also, on this one, roughed up those edges, because they are always talking about how nothing has to be perfect. They actually rough up those edges on purpose, and I loved that so much. I took a strong tool and just started whacking at the edges, and it creates a really nice kind of rough texture. So let me actually go ahead and finish this and we can see what it looks like. It's not going to take me too long because I'm carving those lines instead of having to carve around them. This one's going to be a little bit faster.
If you were to make a mistake, what happens? Is there anything to salvage, or?
In art like this, they like to embrace those mistakes. So being able to embrace your mistake. Otherwise, with ones like these, if you make a mistake on this side, you have another side. If you mistake on both of the sides, you have a whole nother block in the rest of the set. With this one, if you make a mistake, you can always get another little block and try again. So if you have something to practice on beforehand, like maybe getting a tiny little linoleum block the same size and practicing your carving on something like that, and then going into the real thing, it's really going to help. So let me go ahead and finish up this. And another thing is, while you're working, you're going to want to test out your prints. So once you have the entire thing carved out, you want to test it. You want to print something with this, make sure it's looking good, and then you continue carving if you need to adjust anything. And I do like to carve the same line from both sides so that I don't have any thin lines. So sometimes I can carve and one side will be thick and the other side will be thin based on how I dig in and pull up. If I do that, I will flip it and do the same thing so it's even on both sides. You have another question?
Let's say you messed up all sides of all your blocks. Can you just like chop it off and start from a fresh flat side?
I'm sure you could. I don't know how I would cut this stone. And if I did, I would want it to be completely flat. So if you did do that, you can absolutely try it, but make sure that it's flat and even with the rest of the block. Yes?
We actually just had one of our other viewers suggest a belt sander.
Oh yeah, that works. Okay. So I have basically the whole thing carved out. It is not perfect. It's not even. That is okay. Again, I'm going to try and embrace any imperfections. That is a big part of this type of art style. But let's go ahead and test it out. See what it's looking like. I'm just tapping it into that red paste I showed you. And that red paste is going to be made up of 3 different things. It's going to be cinnabar or vermilion, some type of red deep pigment. It's going to have a little bit of oil to bind it together, and it's going to be mixed with Chinese mugwort usually, and it's going to be kind of fibery. It's going to create a nice little pad that holds that ink in there. But let's go ahead and test out what we've carved so far. And I like to press it down and then just kind of lean it towards my edges to make sure I get a nice little print. And that's what it's looking like right now. I can always go in and adjust it how I want. I can even go in and add like a little design around the edges. I can rough up the edges like I said. And you can get some ghost prints depending on what ink you have. Let's go ahead and see. I like to tap it in there a couple of times, making sure it's nice and inked up. Try another one. But there's that. So this is going to be your signature for something like this. You can use it in all of your art however you want. I always like to make sure I wipe this off before I put it back in my set. But a big thing is making sure that you are incorporating it into your artwork. It's going to be an element of your composition, basically. So if I'm looking at my cow and I want to put my stamp on here, I'm going to figure out where I want to put it. I feel like in order to balance it, I need something here. So I feel like that's a perfect spot for my signature. And it doesn't have to be in the bottom right. It doesn't have to be on the bottom at all. It can be way up here. I can put it in her forehead if I want to. As long as it's thought out and part of your composition, it's going to work out. Now let's go ahead and add my stamp. To my cow here. I'm going to put it right here, make sure I have it going the right way. Using those lines on the paper to help me line it up perfectly. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Like I said, art like this embraces those imperfections. Ta-da! And now I have my finished cow ink painting with my little signature stamp on there. Again, I'm going to make sure I wipe it off with my rag.
Your
Keep it nice and clean.
Fit any more perfectly.
I am very thankful that my initials are symmetrical. But yeah, so that is the traditional Chinese ink painting. You can absolutely do landscapes, just a single flower. You can do so much with this. And even if this isn't going to be your main medium, just trying this out is going to help you improve with other mediums. So definitely try it out, even if you're just a little bit curious. And there's so many different sets that we have that you can try from. So cleanup is super easy. Since it does break down super well with water, you can just rinse it out in the sink for cleanup. But yeah, are there any final questions before we finish up today? All right. Well, if you end up trying this out, please share what you have done or what you think. Go ahead and share that on our Facebook page, Jerry's Live Facebook page. If you are not a part of that yet, don't forget that we have that one security question that lets you in. If you had fun today, we will be back next week. Emmy will be here next week with a very special guest. We have Liquitex coming to show us a brand new product, so definitely come check that out. It's super fun. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I really hope you guys get to try this out for yourselves. I find this so much fun to use. But thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you next time. Bye!